I really had a hard time with the online learning environment. And I'll say that up front now because some people will argue that it was good for them, it was bad for them. I did not do well with it.
I think my biggest takeaway from online school was kind of like learning time management skills.
Since it was up to the teachers to decide when they were going to have the classes, I'd have days where like I literally had no classes, but then I also had a day where I had to sit in front of a computer for like 6 hours straight.
I had 7 different teachers, and every single one of them had something completely different on how to teach us.
It's kind of difficult to stay focused when you're in your own environment and you have all of the things that distract you at home.
I'd get very frustrated because I didn't get it, and then it was like I had to wait to write an email, and it was just like it's so much more like a process of just being able to raise your hand.
Multiple classes back to back, and you're just sitting staring at your computer. I got so bored and like started to do other things because like the teachers are on the other side of the screen, so like they can't really see what you're doing.
Last spring, when the pandemic hit, I was working in a school that really took it seriously right away. And we had an innovation team, and these 3 members of this team really did research and connected us with experts who work in online learning. We had a partnership with the Global Online Academy. And they emphasized over and over again that when you go to online learning, you cannot just take your in-class curriculum and plug it online, that you'll actually only get done probably half of what you planned for in-class learning.
One class, my teacher, we would like get a lecture in class, and then she would send a video of a PowerPoint with her voice over it, which was basically the same exact thing we did in class, but for homework.
In my school, they had the daily do now question just to show attendance, and then just put out the work and were like, good luck. And I think that if they made mandatory Zoom calls, it's kind of like that is more like school structured, like you are at school but at home.
One of the problems that one of my teachers faced was kind of the unwillingness to adapt, and it was just like too complicated to change the entire curriculum, so she kind of just kept the curriculum with all the new circumstances, which was incredibly difficult for me and many people in that class.
The most marginalized group overall are students. Who's experienced every classroom over multiple years, who's observed more than anybody, who has more experience in different classrooms with different ideas. They are an untapped resource.
Ultimately, our job is to help kids, and if I'm doing something and I think it's fine, well, that's great. That's my perception, but I'm not a kid. You know, end of the first week, I did a quick little survey, and then the week after I had done one asking like for feedback. What can I do to make things better for you? And the responses I got, like I really had to take a step back and reflect. I mean, I'm grateful they were very honest, but one of them actually wrote, you know, I don't think you realize how stressful it is when you send so many emails. And I was like, no, I don't realize that.
The best change has come when teachers and students take advice from each other.
So then, Georgia, what could it look like for the school to get more student input, like various voices?
Yeah, well, I guess I should preface that like we are a very student-centered school. Like almost all of the leadership is coming from students. So my interpretation of what student voice looks like might be a lot different than somebody at a different school. And that's just checking in with the students because sometimes they know more than you think they do.
So I did a whole student choice project, which was Genius Hour. I've always been a huge proponent of student choice. I've tended to do that more with reading, where my class's foundation is independent reading and choice. But even this sort of challenged me to expand the notion of how student choice can drive the content as opposed to me driving the content. And they were, for the most part, highly engaged. And I had such a range of, I had one girl who wanted to teach herself roller skating tricks, and she made an Instagram page video and every day she have a different video, but she also researched like the history of roller skates. Apparently roller skates have had an impact on social change. She found all these strange things. I mean, and that's English work, that's reading, that's writing, that's creating and producing.
I had them choose a book that was ethical in science, and I had them sort of read it and take the position of one of the characters and write a position statement on, if this were me, how would I have done that? So there was Radium Girls, there was exposure, there was painkillers, so they could choose from a wide variety of things, and they read it in terms of like, okay, if I was the scientist, or if I was the consumer, or if I was the citizen. We did posts. So they wrote a discussion post and they responded to each other. I just was so excited to read what they were discovering. And I think, again, choice and ownership over what they did made the difference. And I don't know why I don't have more choice in my classroom in general. So I think that would be something that I would try and implement a lot more often.
The one takeaway for me is that if you want to cover content, you have to, and you want to keep the kids motivated, you make them responsible for teaching. And they rise to the occasion. They don't want to disappoint their classmates. They can't just kind of play video games on the side. And so for synchronous classes that are full of content, have them, I mean, you have to give them choice about what they want to teach, but within limits, it has really worked.
At least in my experience in high school with the last couple of months in online format, I found that the most engaging classes were the ones that I was able to participate in, whether that was in breakout groups or small group projects, anything like that was so helpful, because there were moments where I would be frustrated as heck because my classmates wouldn't really want to do the project. But at the same time, it wasn't really as much about the educational purpose of it as it was about the socialization. Because at the same time, we weren't getting any socialization.
I think with the technology and the setup, it makes it harder because a lot of kids are more withdrawn on the computer. So you really have to work even harder to bring them out. I know good instructors, when they go on Zoom, the first thing they do is they talk to everybody who's in the classroom to see how they're doing.
I ended up using the beginning of that hour, the first, say, 15, 20 minutes of all class connection. Let's connect. Let's talk to each other. How did the homework go? How did yesterday go? Where are we headed? And then students were either broken up into groups to work on projects or discussion, or they had that rest of that hour to do their English. And I did not give a lot of homework. I wanted it to fit within the school day.
Honestly, I didn't know the kids very well before remote learning, but after asking those questions every day, I'd ask questions like, what's one thing you think that kids understand that adults don't? So I asked like a huge range of questions, and a lot of them we would go back and forth all day in those discussions. So I feel like those relationships built.
I think building those connections ends up improving the teaching, because when the kids feel more comfortable in that Zoom meeting and know something about each other, they become a little more willing to share ideas and take a chance. This disruption in education right through the pandemic it's kind of shaking up our thinking about the communication between teachers and students. So many of us, administrators and teachers and students, were trying to figure out the day-to-day logistics. And I think one of the dangers there is that we lose sight of pausing and thinking and reflecting on best practices. And going forward, whether it's online or in school, the importance of giving teachers time to talk to each other along the way, not at the end of the year in an in-service or at the beginning of the year, but along the way, carving out real time for real conversation on what's working and what's not. because all the teachers in every school are getting feedback from their students, they're designing, and that just goes to waste if they're not sharing it. I really have high hopes that out of this challenge of learning online and figuring out how to do education during a pandemic, that we're actually going to come out with a better method of education and curriculum for students, all students across the board. We cannot escape learning. We are all learning.
I think the biggest thing to everyone is just don't stop trying to make this work.